the name carries a responsibility and a connection to my home community, and that's the land. And Wata is the name of the community, but in Mohawk it means maple. And that is because of the maple trees in the community. And so I feel that my name is also connected to my community.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to You Create's podcast, Many Different Words, broadcasting on CJSW Radio, where we will hear authentic stories from special guests from all backgrounds and bridge the gap between non-Indigenous and Indigenous communities with a special focus on the Canadian healthcare system.
We want to open up the floor to honest discussions and get a deeper insight into how we can improve our healthcare systems, practices, and work on our own biases. You are listening to CJSW 90.9 FM, broadcasting out of Calgary, Alberta at the University of Calgary campus radio station located on Treaty 7 land. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nation, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney First Nations. The city of Calgary is also home to Métis Nation of Alberta, District 5 and 6. I would also like to note that University of Calgary is situated on land adjacent to where Bow River meets the Elbow River, and that the traditional Blackfoot name of this place is Mukinstis, which we now call the city of Calgary.
Garhinita Courtney Clark, a Doctor of Science in Rehabilitation and Health Leadership candidate, is a distinguished leader and advocate in Indigenous child and family health, employing community-based Indigenous research methods. Her expertise spans Indigenous health, child and youth health, mental health, and addiction medicine, and specialized medical education. As the founder and CEO of Courtney Clark Consulting, she champions medical education in health sciences, research, and policy practice. Courtney is a co-creator of the Healthy Homes model to tackle First Nations interconnected health and housing crises. Additionally, she serves as a health researcher for the Government of Canada, was an associate chair at the National Consortium for Indigenous Medical Education, and is the director of Indigenous Health at the Canadian Medical Association. Thank you so much for joining us today, and if there's any information that I've missed, you can feel free to put that in.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
So let's start off with our questions here. Can you tell us a little bit more about your research interests and how you integrate your interests into mental health and addictions medicine?
Yes, so it's hard to specifically identify one research interest when it comes to Indigenous health. And I like to take a holistic approach to my conceptualization and my approaches towards promoting Indigenous health and advocating for health research methods that promote Indigenous self-determination. And so that has primarily meant that I work directly with Indigenous communities, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, to understand their community-based priorities, work with their leadership, governance structures, and community members to understand the realities in the communities as well as the anticipated priorities or future directions that the communities would like to see their health move into. And so it has focused on mental health workshops. In some cases, I have promoted various land-based healing opportunities as well as opportunities that provide a space for community to gather. Often it involves all ages of a life course, from the youth all the way to the elders within the community. And that comes in phases. it relies heavily on positive relationship building. And so whether I'm working within an academic, westernized institutional role, or I'm working within my own consulting capacities, I always remember to reflect and lead with transparency and reciprocity and accountability. And those principles promote the most positive relationship building. And through that, I've had the opportunities to provide various mental health and holistic focused workshops for children and families.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. In your perspective, how do you see holistic and how do you see community building? What are the key factors that make up these two words?
So in holistic, in the sense of the word, I like to think back to my traditional teachings. I am Haudenosaunee, I'm Mohawk, I'm Bear Clan. I reign from Wata Mohawk territory in central Ontario. And so all of those things provide context and teachings to how I conduct myself in this life, in my work, and in my personal life as well. So essentially, holistic to me involves that self-reflection and understanding of your identity and what that means for your own health and well-being and being able to express your identity authentically. And then I also think there's an additional component to that of a holistic sense of self, physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. And if those parts of your well-being are off balance, then you may experience unhealthy symptoms or realities. So those components of understanding your own self and your identity in relation to your ancestors and the generations to come, as well as the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual, contribute to my understanding and promotion of holistic health. And what was the second word you asked me to contextualize?
Community building.
Community building. So community building, I don't think I can give a recipe for or a step-by-step guide, but if I could define community building, I think it would focus on understanding that one of the primary indicators of health for Indigenous peoples is the right to exercise their right to self-determination. Mm-hmm. We as Indigenous peoples have an inherent right to self-determination, and that means to determine our own health journeys and to determine our own life courses within the historical context of how Canada came to be. That right was taken away as we are and were the first peoples on this land. And when colonization ensued, the right to determine our own agency was threatened, oppressed, and nearly led to our, not able to exercise ourselves as Indigenous peoples. And so being able to centralize the right to self-determination through any community building effort is my central guiding light. And then, of course, relationship building. Understanding that although there are Indigenous rights, inherent rights to self-determination, as outlined in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which Canada is a signatory to, as well as other relevant documents. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission's final report also reiterates the primary effects that the right to self-determination promotes and the well-being that comes out of exercising this right. But we cannot achieve optimal health or well-being without positive relationships. And that is where the opportunities for support for people to reconcile their own understandings of Canada's history and promote this right for self-determination of Indigenous peoples, of Indigenous governments, governing systems, ways of knowing, being, and doing. All of this is a step towards repairing and rebuilding positive relationships to promote overall reconciliation in Canada. So I would say community building involves those two things.
Awesome. I love that. Also, you mentioned about your Mohawk territory. Could you share how your upbringing in this territory, in Central Ontario, influenced your career path?
That's a really great question. So, as I mentioned, my family, I come from Kanien'kehá:ka, or Mohawk peoples, from a small reserve located in Central Ontario on Georgian Bay called Wata Mohawk Territory. And my connection there is through my mother, my maternal line. That is how our families traditionally structured their kinship models, is maternal. And so my mom is my connection to that territory, as well as my dada, or my grandmother, and her mother, my great-grandmother, Iris. And, it goes all the way up, the line goes all the way up. And specifically, I didn't grow up in the community. So I grew up on and off the community with school. I had to, of course, attend school as a child, and so the community doesn't have a school in the community. So children who live there have to take a bus off of the territory to attend school within the closest municipality. And so I was raised outside of the community for educational opportunities. My grandmother's and mother has always emphasized the opportunities that education can provide for people. And so that was always a primary principle of my upbringing, was the value that education can provide for you in life, and the opportunities that can come. So that was a huge part of my upbringing, and why I was not a permanent resident of my home territory. And later in my life, I've had the amazing opportunities to maintain those connections, of course, throughout my life. I have family that resides there, and have been able to visit and still stay connected to the generations before me that resided there. And most recently, throughout my doctoral research, I conducted applied research with the community leadership in Wata. And so that was an amazing, cathartic experience that I was able to return to the community in my capacity as a research student, but also as Kahinata Courtney Clark, and learn more about stories and histories and teachings that are rooted in that territory, in that very land. And so that was an unparalleled experience, and continues to inspire my work going forward. And of course, it wasn't just a one-time visit of doing research. I, intend to continue the work we've started in the community, and intersect in many other ways to support the Indigenous health and well-being of my home.
Thanks so much for sharing all of that. And I completely agree that education is commonly emphasized as being something important for success, especially in the Western and modernized world. But being able to maintain your traditional and cultural and ancestral values among that, I think you're very fortunate to be able to do that. I think a lot of people lose that as they're kind of integrated into the education system.
Absolutely. I recognize that my family is very blessed to be able to reconnect and reclaim a lot of our Mohawk tradition throughout the past few decades. It never was gone, but it had been dormant for some time. But I come from a strong line of Mohawks that have always been on the front lines of advocacy and change champions. So I think I have that just innately in me.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you did have to travel to another place for school when you were younger. And I imagine this is because there have been some accessibility issues. Do you see that there are some unique challenges like these when you're conducting research with Indigenous health? For instance, accessibility to doctors or healthcare centers?
Absolutely. Accessibility is one of the key indicators for health outcomes. And without the basic foundational necessities of, for example, primary health care provider or clean water or a safe environment to be in, can always affect the health outcomes. And the overall resilience is clear among many Indigenous communities and peoples that despite generations of challenges, there has been resilience and strength through community-based solutions.
And as a researcher working with Indigenous health, what are some of these responsibilities that you have?
As a researcher who works in Indigenous health, who is also Indigenous, I acknowledge the many hats I wear and the roles that I am associated with and those responsibilities that I carry in each of those roles. And so as a health researcher, of course, I understand the value in evidence-based discussions, evidence-based decision-making, and promoting knowledge generation and dissemination. As an Indigenous woman, I am deeply connected to the land-based healing, perhaps the more natural or non-biomedical paradigm of what health and wellness is, and more of a preventive approach to health. So when we try and gel all of these concepts and ideas, it does sometimes meet a conflict, or there is not an easy gelling. For example, one primary example I can provide is ethics. So if we're researching within a institution that is a westernized institution, there are ethics, there are protocols, there are expectations from the institution to provide information, data, and control to the institution. Within my health researcher role as an Indigenous health researcher, I often have to negotiate these conversations and dialogues that promote the Indigenous right to self-determination, which includes the ethics and the data stewardship and sovereignty around that Indigenous peoples have as rights holders, as partners in the research and as leaders in their own health journeys. So there is often new hybrid versions of research protocols, of agreements, and of data sharing and transparency mechanisms to ensure that the ownership and the control, access and possession is accounted for, and the Indigenous nations, peoples, and governments are holding that power.
How do Indigenous communities feel when research is being done in these nations?
That's a really great question, and I often think about how far we've come in generations of change makers and Indigenous-led advocacy. That research, if we look at it in a historical context, there's been medical colonialism. There's been institutions and systems of oppression in Canada that have operated to disenfranchise and harm Indigenous peoples. And so research is one of those tools that has been harmful to Indigenous peoples. However, research has also been a practice in Indigenous communities since time immemorial, from Indigenous lenses, from Indigenous practices, methods, and knowledge bases. So if we're speaking about research from the westernized position, research has gone from doing research on Indigenous peoples to doing research for Indigenous peoples to doing research now with Indigenous peoples. Whereas on the other end of that, we have Indigenous communities that have always generated knowledge, protected knowledge, maintained knowledge, passed down knowledge to generations. And, there's different degrees of knowledge. There's sacred knowledge, there's traditional knowledge, there's generationally, infused knowledge, and then there's day-to-day ways to conduct yourself and protocols to follow. And so when we think about research, there's only been a predominant exposure of the research that the Western world has been privy to or has been leading. And so when we bring in Indigenous folks into the mix, there has been now a public consciousness, an awakening to the many ways of knowing and being and doing. And this goes for all populations in this world. There are more than just the predominant ways of conducting research, which we know as the scientific method.
Right. And just for the listeners here, would you be able to share some of these ways of knowing?
Yes. So one of my favorites that I like to share is storytelling. So storytelling is an Indigenous research practice. It is also a tradition practiced among many Indigenous peoples around the world. It is not something that is unique to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. However, there are unique nuances to the way each community and nation conduct their ceremonies and their storytelling. So, for example, in my experiences, storytelling serves as a great tool for knowledge sharing and knowledge translation. It is a way of knowing that can be expressed orally, it can be expressed visually, it can be expressed through movement, through dance, through music, through song, and that is all very interdisciplinary and also extremely valuable to Indigenous ways of knowing, being, and doing, and maintaining these ways. I think the greatest way to describe Indigenous ways of knowing, being, and doing are based off of thousands and thousands of years of peoples coming together and living on this land and learning the science behind it and understanding the entire ecosystem that we live in and the environmental elements. I think it comes from learning and knowing what works and what hasn't worked. I think it comes from understanding the cycles of the earth and recognizing that there's patterns, there's a cadence to the earth's activities and a clear connection with the concepts around the relations of all the beings on this earth. There's a clear connection that humans are not the top and animals and land and water is below humans. I think that Indigenous ways of knowing, being, and doing are holistic, and we're a circle of relation.
Wow, that's a beautiful explanation. And I also really love the concept of artistic storytelling, because it's really beautiful to see how we can bring community together and connect with them in a way that's different. Like, instead of just providing them with academic literature that doesn't really have that connection with people, I think it's really nice to have these different ways of knowing. And it's important, like you mentioned.
Absolutely. I think experiential opportunities are way more impactful than reading anything from a textbook. If you can experience something firsthand or hear a story shared from somebody's experience firsthand, it, leaves that mark in you that you'll think about this story, you'll remember this story, and you'll always have that story to draw on throughout your life as you walk through your life. And not only is it healing for the recipient of the story, it is also healing for the storyteller, as the storyteller has the opportunity to express their feelings, their experiences as they experience them, share their own voice, and lead their own life story through their own words, or art or dance or movement or whatever it is that they're expressing their story through, whichever medium it may be. But I think that's a great component of experiential learning and storytelling and being with Indigenous peoples.
Yeah, I love how every aspect of our life is connected to the land. And I just wanted to know how you would describe your connection to the land. Maybe like in terms of, we could also talk about plant-based medicine, because it's very interconnected with the land. So I just want to know your thoughts on that.
So my Mohawk name is Garhineta, and Garhineta means she who leads the trees, or she who leads the forest. And this name comes from my great aunt Gertie. And the way that my family taught me was that the name carries a responsibility and a connection to my home community, and that's the land. And Wata is the name of the community, but in Mohawk it means maple. And that is because of the maple trees in the community. And so I feel that my name is also connected to my community that way because of the maple trees and my name meaning she who leads the trees. So I feel a great sense of responsibility, but also gratitude around having that name and being able to carry that name in my day-to-day. And so that is one way I would say I am connected to the land and my community specifically. And then land-based healing is so essential, and especially within my research with the youth and children, the opportunity to experience the healing effects of the environment, of nature, of land-based healing is pivotal in a child's early years. And without that exposure within those habit-forming years and those key developmental stages, we miss out on that resilience that nature provides and that strength that the land can offer ourselves and our families and our whole communities. And so I think I always remind myself of that. And I also inadvertently find myself on the water or in the water when I'm feeling stressed, or, park my car at the end of the day and overlook the river and try and just decompress and find solace in the nature. I also have severe allergies to many different trees and shrubs and grasses. So I have a sort of love-hate relationship at times with the environment. But for more or less, the environment has proven very healing to me. And specifically, I garden a lot. And so I have green thumb, if you will. I grow plant-based medicines. I teach these practices to my children and to my family and friends, and provide offerings as well as gifts and as healing bundles for folks that may need it or may one day need it. Some of my favorites to grow right now have been tobacco, traditional tobacco, lavender, strawberries, sage. I have a lot of cedar that grows in my yard and around the area that I live. So I don't have to grow cedar, but I do gather cedar. And I make sure that, everything I'm taking from the land, I give back. And so I like to also plant, just to plant and let grow. Flower bombing is this new thing I've heard about, and it's where you just sprinkle seeds all over a bare piece of land, and the next year flowers will grow. So trying to keep our pollinators up. I also just love to plant flowers and various plants that will bring the birds and the bees and the butterflies around as well.
Oh, I love that. My parents also love gardening, so if I can't find them indoors, they're outdoors. With that, I'll have to ask you, what is your favorite plant?
That's a very difficult question. I don't know if I could just pick one. So are you thinking medicines or herbs? Edible?
Okay. Do one edible and one medicine.
Okay. I would say my favorite edible plant would be... Oh, this is hard. Oh my goodness.
Or what plant would describe you?
Well, Maple's in her name.
I would say a tree would describe me because my name is Garhineta. She is, leader of the trees. So I think, that maple tree might be appropriate. I think that my favorite plant-based medicine is lavender. I find the aroma very relaxing. I like to make things with it, so I'll do plant-based salves and scrubs and topical treatments, candles. So lavender is a great plant-based medicine for that. And then if I had to choose my favorite plant to eat, I think it might be basil.
Oh, I love both of those.
I have 3 different kinds of basil in my garden. And one is the Italian basil, one is a Thai basil, and one is a red basil. And I've never known so many dynamic flavors in one. So I'd say basil is a strong first right now.
This is all new information to me, so I'll have to go find some different types of basil after this.
Yeah.
Gardening is a never-ending adventure.
I love that. What sparked your interest actually into plant medicine and gardening, I guess?
I always grew up with it. Mm-hmm. I never intentionally thought, I'm going to go dig in the dirt and grow things. I actually am sort of not like that. And then I don't necessarily like to get my hands dirty and play in dirt, but I read I'd always been brought up with it, with gardens and with planting my food and eating food, cucumbers, tomatoes, peppers, anything that you could grow in this Ontario climate throughout the summer. And so I always grew up understanding the value in growing your food and canning it for the winter and making jams and doing the pickling and those traditions that many families do. But I read a study on the health effects and health promoting aspects of the microorganisms in soil, and that actually getting your hands dirty and playing in soil is healing and provides scientifically proven increases in mood, in wellness, in health overall. And so I tested it out, and I think it's been working ever since.
I love that.
And if you could share, just like as a beginner's guide to traditional plant-based medicines, what are kind of the things you would tell our listeners, some facts you would tell your kids?
So I think plant-based medicines are very valuable, and I think that they've served many different peoples and groups for since time immemorial. But I think that there's a new understanding for many that the earth and its elements and its plants are essential to our sustenance on this planet and to human life itself. So although it may seem like we have so many plants and so much fresh water and so many resources, I think it's very important to be cognizant that we need to maintain our Mother Earth and respect our Mother Earth for these resources to keep replenishing our health. And so there are plant-based medicines that are sacred and that are medicines that we are at risk of not being able to have or access or use if, our climate isn't right, or if our earth keeps telling us that we're over consuming or that we're not taking care of our Mother Earth, then we won't have those plant-based medicines or healing practices to turn to. And so I think there's a very important message in protecting our plant-based medicines, and that comes with understanding climate and planetary health and promoting that over profit.
I love that. Also, I just wanted to come back and switch the gears and quote what you said previously in terms of how you said research is like basically switching from on to for to with Indigenous peoples. I really loved how you said that. And I know you also established a Courtney Clark Consulting, and I just wanted to know more about that and if you could talk more about it.
Sure, thank you. Yes, so Courtney Clark Consulting was a passion project that came about in 2016, and it came about after being shoulder tapped so many times to do various jobs and projects and consult and advise on Indigenous health related topics, on Indigenous student recruitment and student support through post-secondary education topics as a recent graduate of post-secondary at the time, and as a newly employed person who was working within a post-secondary institution. And it quickly became an opportunity to take that spectrum of research. It was the opportunity to take research on Indigenous peoples with Indigenous peoples to by Indigenous peoples. So, AKA me, Indigenous. And so I was able to take a lot of the requests I was receiving from various leaders and policymakers and researchers and change makers and create Courtney Clark Consulting. And it quickly took off as a consulting firm that has now worked on municipal, territorial, provincial, and national levels around many different Indigenous health priorities and issues, and all of it is to promote Indigenous right to self-determination and Indigenous ways of knowing, being, and doing through research.
Mm-hmm. And I know that one of the projects through Courtney Clark Consulting is the Healthy Homes Model. Could you talk a little bit more about this project and its impact on addressing First Nations health and our very recent housing crisis, which is still there?
Mm-hmm. So the Healthy Homes Model was a collaboration that I co-created with my partner, Jason Morningstar, who's a housing specialist. And we decided to combine our forces and create a comprehensive model that not only addresses Indigenous health priorities within the communities. First Nations predominantly is who we've partnered with on this model, and pairs it with the housing realities that the community members are experiencing, and centers the notion of agency and capacity building for Indigenous communities to be able to implement their own programming, workshops, and change campaigns that address health, housing, and the training that's needed to maintain health, wellness, and housing. So essentially, what that looks like is multi-week visits to communities where housing inspection campaigns occur, but at the same time as when the community-wide housing infrastructure is being inspected and reported on what needs to be repaired, I conduct health and wellness workshops with the children and the families in the community, and these all center around various holistic opportunities for healing, physical activity. Recent workshops have included plant-based medicines and making various plant-based healing modalities, whether it be topical salves, teas, scrubs, and have also centered on basic home maintenance workshops as well, so that homeowners can feel equipped and trained to deal with common household issues such as electrical, plumbing, and air-related issues. And so a lot of that has been developed iteratively and in collaboration with various community partners that we have conducted the Healthy Homes Model with. And it's been a great opportunity to understand, again, through research, how Indigenous nations see their health being promoted through addressing housing concerns, addressing holistic health concerns for all of their family members, whether it be mental, emotional, physical, or spiritual, or all of the above, whether it be related to children or middle-aged or elder-aged folks. It's created a space for the community to gather and to share their traditional teachings related to health and wellness, as well as understand their day-to-day environment they're living in, which is their home, and how to maintain the health of that.
That's very insightful, and it's really exciting to hear that we're doing these new models and implementing these new initiatives that can disseminate information about Indigenous knowledge and healing. So are you only located in Ontario, or has this been done in other places around Canada?
Yes, so we have conducted Indigenous health workshops across Canada, and I've had the opportunity to visit coast to coast to coast, and it's been a pretty extraordinary and remarkable experience to do that alongside my family. So I also will mention that the Healthy Homes model is an initiative that is also designed to promote mentorship. And so what that looks like is I bring my kids with me, and they volunteer and help out with the healing workshops, with the health workshops, with the children's workshops. They are repairing different repairs in the homes. They're helping conduct home repairs with our team of engineers and electricians, and the teams that we have collaborate within the housing portion of the campaign. And so the Healthy Homes model is also a vehicle to promote capacity building for all the generations, whether they're youth or elders. It's a space for everyone to come and learn something new, and also provide their own knowledge. And so that has been pivotal and integral to how the programs have developed. So they've been different in each community that we've worked with, dependent on, the remoteness of the community. We've flown cargo up on chartered planes because it's a remote flying community, 300 kilometers away from the nearest municipality. There's been times that we've been facilitating the Healthy Homes Project model in communities where they've had natural disasters happen, and we've had to pivot and reconvene, and it's just made the program that much more integrated and rigorous and community based. And so we really are on the ground working with community leaders, community members, and shaping and tailoring the programs and the workshops to their immediate and long-term goals.
Mm-hmm. And this all ties back in with how we were talking about community building. Not only are you providing workshops and information and spaces, but you're also learning from the community and asking the community what they want, what help they want, and maintaining that relationship long-term.
Exactly. And it hasn't only been about, providing help. I think that there's been a huge component of the Healthy Homes model that has been developed and strengthened and sustained through the participants that have attended the workshops and have really explained and exemplified how the community, the regional specific, the nation-based cultural components and language are essential to the experience, are essential to the positive outcomes that will be carried out as a ripple effect of these workshops, of these multi-week opportunities within the Healthy Homes model. But the language and the cultural components are what really sustain that ripple effect throughout the years to come. And so we've been so grateful to have elders and translators and people step up to the Healthy Homes model programming plate and support the development of the projects to be authentic.
Right. And you can't really do much if the community doesn't want to be involved or isn't invested in your mission. So that's really great that you're building all of these relations with these communities. And,
essential.
Mm-hmm. And would you say that there has been improvement since when you've started Courtney Clark Consulting? Or I'll rephrase that. Do you think the Healthy Homes model is achieving what it's intended to achieve?
I think in the few years, 5 years or so, that we've had the Healthy Homes model in rotation, it's been very impactful for the communities we've partnered with. I think that we've seen real progress and success in various programs we've run and we've collaborated on. I think for the long-term indicators of health outcomes, of positive change in relation to exercising the right to self-determination, in relation to realizing child and family health, prosperity, and to see those gaps close between the Indigenous health realities and the non-Indigenous health realities in Canada, then that will take generations, as it took generations for these health disparities to actualize. And so I think it's going to take generations to really see the impact positively from efforts such as the Healthy Homes model and the various advocacy and change programs that are launched in this time, this decade, to really see that positive, sustained change through time.
Are there any other long-term goals for your research and consulting work?
I hope that my research work can genuinely represent the experiences and realities and priorities of the research partners and participants that have been involved in the success of the research that I've been a part of, and for that to be reflected, we look for increased representation of our Indigenous ways of knowing, being, and doing in health systems, in educational systems in Canada. I think I will see a long-term indicator as positive if the representation of Indigenous researchers, physicians, health professionals also increases. And for that to happen, there needs to be a fundamental shift in how health systems currently operate and how educational systems currently operate in exclusive or inaccessible ways for many Indigenous children and learners and adults and patients. So I think that my longer term goal of being an Indigenous health researcher is to see those long-term improvements around representation and safety and accessing the health and educational systems.
Do you think that there has been a more representation, for instance, in the last 2 decades? Like, do you think there's more Indigenous educators and providers in the healthcare system?
I think we've definitely made strides in Canada to understand the need to increase representation among Indigenous peoples in all areas of the country. And there most definitely has been a lot of Indigenous-led work for generations that has, over time, gained more and more exposure. And so I think in the last 10 years, we've seen a huge influx of public consciousness around the truth and reconciliation. So I think that is a huge positive. However, there is a caveat to that, in that there's still uncertainty among the general population in how to go about reconciliation, in how to take that first step or continue those steps. And so we're at the point, kind of, in my opinion, where there's a lot more understanding around how Indigenous peoples live, how Indigenous peoples have rights to determine our own futures. And there's been a lot of understanding of the wrongs that have been done to Indigenous peoples by the Canadian system. The next phase is going to be actualizing that knowledge and implementing ways to reconcile those feelings. And so there's still that phase that we're we're working through, I think, as a country, and that's going to take time. But with more representation and more Indigenous leaders within the mainstream, we'll see that accountability threaded throughout all of our systems.
Mm-hmm. And reconciliation is such a big word, right? Like, we're all saying reconciliation in the news, we hear in our classrooms, and we're talking about it now, but it can be really hard to, at least in my viewpoint, to see what does that actually mean. Does that mean that we do more research with Indigenous communities? Does that mean that we're talking to Indigenous communities? What does that even look like?
I think for me it means taking up space and understanding that we have voices and we have knowledge to share, and everyone has a gift to contribute to their work, their life, their families, and the overall common good. And so if we approach everybody from a human space, I think that is a great way to start the reconciliation efforts. We see racism every day in the healthcare system, in the educational systems. We see it in hidden curriculum. We see it in what we do not challenge. We see it in people leaving the academy or leaving the hospital, or, hesitancy to engage in the formal institutional procedures and processes because of the harms that are repeatedly caused to Indigenous folks. So I think that should be a priority.
What would be your favorite part be in working in advocating or engaging in the spirit of reconciliation?
I think my favorite part in propelling reconciliation, or my passion for this work, is being able to connect with Indigenous community. I think that there's been a lack of understanding of the diversity of Indigenous cultures, communities, and strengths, and there's no one way to describe being Indigenous. And as a First Nations woman, I grew up with my own understanding of what it was to be a Haudenosaunee, Kanien'kehá:ka female woman, Mohawk, but learning about all of the different clans and communities and nations in Turtle Island and beyond, even Indigenous peoples from around the world have so much knowledge to share, and I every time have the opportunity to witness or listen to research or speakers or experiences shared from Indigenous peoples, especially Indigenous peoples who are working in this space. It serves as an indicator of, you're not alone in this work, and that there's a larger community that you're a part of. And I think that it also reinvigorates my passion and inspiration to continue this work, because it has its challenges. It has its heaviness at times as well.
I guess I'll just end it off with one last question to wrap up the episode for today. If you could leave the listener with one point or learning or highlight, what would it be? It's a big question, but
I think I'd conclude by emphasizing the opportunities for positive change, and those opportunities can include education, policy advocacy, but most of all, it relies on fostering partnerships between Indigenous communities, healthcare providers, researchers, and everyone involved in the decision making of the situation at hand. And I think there's an emphasis to be said around the role of listening and in reflection and in understanding your own knowledge gaps to better support Indigenous-led initiatives and advocacy for change.
Awesome. I love that. I just wanted to say thank you so much again, Garineta, if I'm saying that correctly, hopefully.
That is.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us today, sharing your insights, talking about your experience, everything. And we all really enjoyed our discussion we had today, and we appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedule.
Nyalagoa, thank you very much. It's been an honor, and I look forward to our next time our paths cross.
And we just want to thank CJSW, the Indigenous Global and Local Health Office, the Grandmothers Lodge at the Faculty of Social Work, the UCreate team, and our editor, Atea, for helping us with this podcast. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. And to listen to our full episodes, tune into Apple Music, Spotify, or CJSW.com to listen to more special guests and their insightful discussions. And keep a lookout for our next episodes. And until then, stay warm.